Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pete CD Vinyl World. Today, this is actually Pete CD Vinyl and Comic Book World because we are going to rank our top 10 comic book series that we're fans of. Um, so, I've been a fan of comic books since I was about five and collected mostly in the later 80s, early 90s, um, but picked up a few here and there. But my son got into it more recently, about what, 6 months ago or so.
Yeah, something like that.
So as he's gotten into it, I've started collecting again. We're both fans of comics basically through maybe the early 90s, like 92, 93. We're not really a fan, if you've noticed, like once they started using computers to create the artwork rather than hand drawn.
Yeah.
So also for me, once back then, once they changed over to like Spider-Man 2099, they rebooted like a lot of the series with Marvel at least, and even DC. They had different Superman, different Batman. So I was out of it then as far as buying the new issues and stuff. But we still are collecting the older. I'm mostly like Bronze Age through the Copper Age. I do like Silver Age. I don't really have anything from the Golden Age, which is I guess 1940s.
Yeah.
30s and 40s. Yeah, that stuff's like super expensive. Anyway, so we're both gonna list our top 10, and then we both have a few honorable mentions. So, you want to go first?
Yeah. So, my 10's the Avengers. It's the second, team in Marvel besides Fantastic Four. One right after. The original cast was Iron Man, Hulk, Captain America, Wasp.
And Ant-Man wasn't part of the original, right? Was it?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
I'm not like I like the Avengers, but the comic in general, I think there's too many characters.
Yeah, it's like the X-Men where the lineup changes too much. I like single person comic.
Yeah, I mean it works
series.
better actually in a movie, which they've become so much popular in the movies. Which I like some of the Marvel movies. My favorite Marvel movies are actually those first three Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire. To me, they really were like the Marvel comics in the 70s. The later Marvel, it's basically you didn't have to like read a comic book in your life, which most people who were fans of those probably didn't anyway. But so, and there's just too many series now to keep up with, and
yeah.
So I mean I like the movies, but I'm not like crazy about them. You know. My number 10 is actually not one specific comic, so I'm kind of cheating on. So, my number 10 is basically any of these horror comics, like Vault of Horror, Tales from the Unexpected, Vault of Evil, Where Monsters Dwell. So, I put them sort of in one category because they all, a lot of them have reprints from stories from like the 1930s and 40s anyway. They're not like they weren't new at the time when these comics were released. So I just started as I've gotten back into comics. These are like a lot of the stuff I collect now or try to collect anyway. They're seem to be very expensive, a lot of them. So that's my number 10.
My number 9 is Spider-Man. The only reason he's not up higher on the list is because like you can't.
Which one, Spectacular Spider-Man or
just like any in general? Like,
oh, really?
Because the only reason he's not up above on the list is because I can't buy any of these because they're not for sale anywhere. They're hard to find.
Yeah. So as far as comic books, Amazing Spider-Man in particular is pretty hard to find older issues. I mean pre 1990 and back, or they're up in value. We were at a flea market recently, and there was this comic dealer going on and on about how if you're buying Spider-Man, it's like buying pieces of gold, or better than investing in the stock market, which is really weird because he's not really in the Avengers movies that much, and the newer Spider-Man movies, I'm not really a big fan of. They're okay, but they're just okay, I think. My number 9 is Luke Cage Power Man. And later they combined the series with Iron Fist, so it was Power Man and Iron Fist. But I prefer him as a character because he's more like a normal guy, but just super strong. And if you read these comics, especially from the '70s, they're like a more mature writing. Like they have like stuff going on in the city and stuff like that, which I prefer. You'll see from my list. I'm more of a Marvel fan in general. I think DC, especially when it got into the '70s, Marvel was more realistic. They talked about New York and actual cities rather than like Gotham City. And like DC, even into the '70s, you didn't know if like the story was taking place in the 1940s or the present day. Like with Marvel, you knew, they were talking about what was ever going on in the '70s. So, yeah, so that's my number 9, Power Man.
My number 8 is Thor, originally from Journey into Mystery. Then 114 issue became the Thor. The reason that he's not higher also is because I feel like his comics are too complicated on like the story. I feel like for somebody a lot more and like an adult. So yeah, he's a original Avenger.
Yeah, I mean a lot of his stories are almost like Doctor Strange, where they're like,
yeah, it's like
supernatural
aliens.
stuff. It's different than the Thor that's out in the movies now, right? I mean,
yeah.
So my number 8 is the Punisher. That's the number 1 issue there. I liked him again because he's not a mutant. He's more of a regular human, and it's sort of like in a way similar to Batman in the sense that he's a vigilante. I also like him because he was never really on either side of like the good guys or bad guys. Not that he ever did anything bad, but I always just thought he was a cool character. I don't think they've yet to make a really good Punisher movie. They made a couple that were okay, but nothing spectacular.
My number 7 is surprising, but it's the Thing, original member of Fantastic Four. Then this started in 1983, ran for about 36 issues. I had like 20 of them, but this is in great condition. Got it for $10. Yeah, because he's different from any other character.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because he's the only Fantastic Four guy that wasn't able to change back to.
I mean, he
human.
did, but it took like.
Yeah, he was human for a while.
Yeah.
What was that, number 7?
Yeah.
All right, my number 7 is Captain America. This is during the period of time where it was actually Captain America and the Falcon. This is part of the Captain America regular series, but they changed the title for a while and had the Falcon. I'm not. It's hard to say, but I felt like I had to put Captain America in there because he was one of the first characters I knew as a kid. And I do like the Falcon as well, so this is why I chose that particular issue. Another thing too, I'm not up to like when I see a cover, I'm like, oh, that's so and so's art, or this is written by this guy and blah blah blah. I know a lot of people are into that stuff. I'm not that into it where I'm like I can identify the artist and all that. But again, 70s era.
So this started either 39 or 40 Detective Comics, starring Batman and sometimes Robin. So this is basically, it's different from Batman comics because he like does stuff like a detective and he solves like crimes.
Yeah, the stories are more intricate. But I always thought that, at least the ones I had, that Robin really wasn't in it as much.
I think he started to go in it in like the 80s or 80s or 90s.
Yeah, I guess they had to put something into it. Next up for me is Daredevil. Again, to me, Daredevil's almost like the Batman of Marvel. And he always like it's hard to explain. He was more like human, down to earth. all of his senses are heightened because he's blind. Uh, he basically fought the same villains as Spider-Man. That's Doctor Octopus. That's one of my favorite villains. I've tried to pick covers that had my favorite villains on them too. I actually thought, besides the Spider-Man movies with Tobey Maguire, that the Daredevil movies with Ben Affleck were some of the best Marvel movies, but they're not really part of the MCU now or canon or whatever. But hopefully they'll get him another series or something. They did have a series, right, on Netflix?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was okay.
Alright, number 5 is gonna be Iron Man. So he's like a millionaire businessman, and then he invents the suit, and then he doesn't, in the first place, doesn't really want to help people, but he eventually comes around and helps people. This is 132 issue against the Hulk. I like these issues against the Hulk because it's basically no story, it's just fighting till the end, basically. And I think this is the first issue where the Hulk loses, so that's cool.
What happens to him? He just leaves?
Well, a lot of these comics are like cliffhangers, and the next issue might be a couple of dollars, so where am I going to find it?
Or they just don't continue the story.
Well, I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, in no way are we like comic experts. These are just our favorite series. My number, that was number 5, right?
Yeah.
My number 5 is Detective, already mentioned. Again, I think Batman is the only DC character I have in my top 10, just because I feel like his series is a lot different than the rest of DC. Not that they're not good, but yeah, like he said earlier, Detective, the stories are more intricate, a lot more detective work, and
not a lot of like superhero fighting.
Yeah,
stuff like
yeah.
that.
And I mean, this one does have the Joker in it, but for the most part, Detective didn't always have his normal villains in it.
It'd really be against like normal people.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
just more crime fighting stuff, like he,
yeah.
I guess, did on a daily basis as opposed to fighting the Joker all the time or whatever.
Yeah. So number 4 is gonna be Superman for me. This is a 12% one, so it has to be in the 60s somewhere. 190 against the elements. So he was like introduced in Action Comics number 1. So he basically has like all basic powers: speed, strength. He has like that eye thing that shoots lasers.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but the one thing about him is like he has like no character development to make him like different. Because besides, he's Clark Kent, and then but in the stories, he's only Clark Kent for like a few pages, and it's so stupid how they don't know he's him and he just has glasses on.
Yeah, yeah.
So
that's where the DC stuff to me is like almost like
a joke.
They think everyone's stupid or whatever. But Superman for me is like outside of the top 10 because I wasn't a huge fan when I was a kid, besides the movies or whatever. And the comics I've read from him or I own, I was just never that impressed. I guess different eras, maybe the 70s and 80s are better, but it just never did it for me that much. I'm surprised he's actually not more popular than, considering he's in all the Justice League movies and
his own movies.
You would think that he would be the number 2 character at DC, but doesn't seem to. DC in general is not as popular as Marvel, you know. My number 4 is Iron Man, already mentioned.
I always wanted that issue.
Yeah,
this
so
cool.
Doctor Doom is probably my favorite villain. Doctor Doom and the Joker. So he, I think, exclusively pretty much appeared in Fantastic Four and Iron Man. Dr. Doom. You don't really see him.
He was in a Thing issue.
Well, yeah, he's part of Fantastic Four, though. But yeah, he's so that's kind of cool that they kept him sort of exclusive, and probably one of the first characters that I read when I was very young. And again, I liked him more because he is a regular guy, really, just in a suit. So I tend to like those heroes more. I am not a fan of X-Men at all. I think I only own like 1 or 2 issues of X-Men, so mutants and those type of characters I'm not really big on. But yeah, Iron Man, one of my favorites.
I'm kind of cheating with number 3 because it's kind of like it's basically the same as Superman, but I have Action Comics. I like this better than Superman because I think the story's a lot more intricate and better. This is from the 70s against the Weather Wizard. Remember? Yeah. So it's basically the same, but these are a little more better because I feel like the story's a lot better.
So does Action Comics have a lot of the villains, or no? Is it more?
It's more it's the same with Batman and Detective. They're both a little different from each other.
Yeah.
But it's still like the premise is the same.
All right, my number 3 is Batman, the regular Batman series. Again, there's the Joker. So yeah, he was definitely one of the first characters that I knew about. I grew up watching the 60s television show. It was on reruns every day. But most people don't know who watched that show that the comic book was way darker and not like that at all. It wasn't campy or anything. And I remember when the 1989 movie came out with Michael Keaton, some people were like, that's not like the TV show at all, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, and trying to explain well, it's more like what the comic book is, like darker. And they actually made a movie like the TV show with George Clooney as the Batman. It was all campy and Jim Carrey. That was a terrible movie, but now the Christian Bale Batman movies are definitely more like the comic than any of the series, even though I actually like the first 2 Batman with Michael Keaton. Probably like the best Batman movies, but he was one of my favorite comics growing up.
For number 2, I have Captain America, originally made by Jack Kirby, the art, back in 1940. I like his stories a lot because he primarily faces like Nazis, stuff like that, and other characters do too. But he primarily does Nazis. This is another one where they face the Hulk. Because originally he was the skinny kid, then he went in this machine that made him all strong. And then, didn't he go in the ice and then that made him?
Yeah.
And then he went back, and then he came back in the 60s, still young, and then fought with the Avengers.
Yeah, so. It's funny you mentioned the Hulk in a couple of your series. I'm not a big fan of the Hulk comic series itself either. I think they're fairly boring and...
it's probably because he doesn't have a lot of like character. He just fights.
Yeah, I mean, he's okay in other series, but his own comic himself, and he's one of the more popular collectible series now. It seems like, even though his movies they just made recently were all terrible, so it's kind of odd. I don't know. My number 2 is the Fantastic Four. That was probably one of the first comics I started buying when I was a kid. It's definitely the best group of superheroes because it's only 4, not 8 or 10 people. This is one I had when I was a kid. I always liked it. Whatever the storyline happens, they all turn old. My original copy, I think the cover was ripped off and everything. I got this, sometime in the late 80s, but I'm surprised. I think they're the next franchise to hopefully get movies made. The couple they made, I didn't even think were that bad.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised they're not as popular as a series as at one time. It was everyone's favorite comic, Fantastic Four.
My number 1 is Fantastic Four. I feel like the first comic series I got into because this is issue 59. This was expensive, but I paid so much money for this. It was all attached. The cover from the book.
Yeah, well, it probably would have been more.
I was just about that. But, yeah, so I like this because the lineups don't change too often, and when they do, it's only for a couple issues.
Yeah.
Like, the Thing leaves for a couple... Well, he leaves and then gets replaced by She-Hulk in the 200s. But, yeah, originally they were scientists, I think, and then they went on this spaceship, and then they had superpowers where one's invisible, one's fire, one stretches, and one's a whole rock. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even though they're my number two comic as well, I have to say that probably past like not what 1985 or so, the stories were just terrible.
Yeah,
They went from their best comic to like their worst, and maybe that's a reason why they lost their popularity.
Yeah, that's when I stopped.
And even the She-Hulk became a member for a while. Like I said previously, we pretty much end our comic fandom like or whatever around 92 93, but for me Fantastic Four is definitely like mid 300s or
yeah,
so.
I ended it at 300 because that's like at least like 86.
Yeah, so yeah, I would say yeah around there, 86 87. And my number one is Amazing Spider-Man. I always thought he had the coolest storylines. Pretty much the coolest villains. Dr. Octopus and the Sinister Six. He does a little bit have Doctor Doom in his comics here and there.
Yeah. Also like the Sandman.
Yeah, cool. The Sandman's cool.
And
Kingpin, the whole Sinister Six is awesome.
And what's his name? The elder villain.
Oh, Green Goblin.
Yeah.
So yeah, and like a lot of the villains, like Dr. Octopus, Green Goblin, they go back to his personal life. You know, like he knew all these people and everything, so it makes it more personal. And of course, it takes place in New York. And like I said about the Luke Cage, whatever's going on in society is sort of going on in the comics as well. And I'll group the other Peter Parker, Spider-Man, and Web of Spider-Man under these two. So that's my favorite comic. And you have any honorable
I got
mentions?
two. For mentions, I got the Hulk. I think his is better in the 80s because half of the issue he's human, so you get more storyline. So I think in the 70s it was a lot more not as good, but I think in the 80s it became a lot better. So, yeah. And then the other one I have Ant-Man. He wasn't in it a lot, but this was like the first one he came back. Because for sometimes he was Giant Man, sometimes he wasn't.
What do you mean? Like part of the Avengers or his own series?
I don't think he ever had his own series.
Oh, because that's Marvel Premiere, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's like a repress of like it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I wonder if he did ever have his own series. So I have like a few honorable mentions. This first one is Marvel 2-in-1, which is basically two heroes get together. So they'll have like the way they did it. It was mostly the Thing, I guess, right? For the most part, and he would team up with another character. I think the 2-in-1 and Marvel Team Up and all those, I'll mention that because that's another honorable mention. Because Marvel Team Up was mostly Spider-Man and another character, like the Spider-Man and Iron Man. I prefer these to like the Avengers because it's only two characters and the stories were all cool. So they're kind of like two of my honorable mentions, and none of them are really that expensive. So you can get like even the early issues fairly expensive. And the DC version of that is Brave and the Bold, where it would have Batman teaming up with, this is Black Canary. These are all pretty good too. Another one is Ghost Rider. I always thought he was a cool supernatural hero. I don't have too many issues because the original ones from the 70s are like a fortune. This was his rebooted series in the, I guess, late 80s. This is number 5. It's got the Punisher in it. And my final one was another one that goes back to me when I was about 5, was the Shogun Warriors. Not a very popular comic, but the toys they made in the late 70s, they had these giant, they're basically robots controlled by humans, but they made these toys that were like 3 feet high and had a cartoon series. And they actually licensed, I guess, the Godzilla character. So Godzilla was part of that toy line. And it was Marvel at that time and actually put out a Godzilla comic series as well. It didn't last very long. I think there's only like maybe like around 40 to 50 issues.
Yeah.
But they're all pretty cool. This one has got the Fantastic Four in it. But
Surprised you didn't put Master of Computers and Honorable Mention.
yeah, it's okay. I guess because he's not really a superhero, I would say. You know.
Look at those horror ones on.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, I'll be getting back to making videos soon. I haven't made one in a while for various reasons. Like, it seems like everyone's just buying every reissue out there and reviewing it. It's crazy. So I tried to keep my channel more of like top 10 lists and just talk about music in general. So I'll get into that more when I make my next video. But if you like these videos, please subscribe, and I'll talk to you later.